What's a news story that got buried that you think more people need to hear? The post office scandal in the UK. Long story short, in 1999 the post office brought in a new computer system, run by Fujitsu, which they rolled out across the entire country. Shortly afterward, individual postmasters, people who run local post offices, began to notice shortfalls in their accounting totals. The post office investigated these cases in isolation and decided the postmasters were stealing money. In reality, these shortfalls were caused by a bug in the Fujitsu software. However, the post office and Fujitsu swept this under the rug, despite receiving reports from independent investigators that the software was to blame. Instead of fixing the software, the post office decided to take their own postmasters to court on fraud charges. It's worth noting that postmasters are effectively like franchise managers for the post office, and are made up largely of nice, unassuming older people who want to run a community service as they wind down towards retirement. You would think that after 4 or 5 of these civil servants with no criminal history were all separately accused of stealing huge sums of money, the post office might wonder if something else was to blame. Nope, over the next 15 years, the post office prosecuted a frankly incredible 736 of their own postmasters, roughly one every single week. Hundreds more were suspended. In total, thousands were probably affected. These people lost their jobs and often went to prison. They were told they had to pay back thousands of pounds they had supposedly stolen. Some killed themselves from the stress. Many of them kept working until old age and died in debt. It took a class action lawsuit in 2021 for anyone to admit that they were innocent. There is a paper trail showing that executives in the post office and Fujitsu knew of the problems with the software even as it was being developed. This is actually pretty recent, yet no one talks about it. Larry Page, the co-founder of Google, has gone missing. Nobody knows where he is. U.S. Virgin Islands are trying to find him to subpoena him, due to his involvement with Jeffrey Epstein. There was a scandal in Germany in the 70s and 80s where the pharmaceutical industry used contaminated blood products to make a medicine for people who got hemophilia, so they don't spend too much money on making the medicine. Hemophilia means that you have no blood clotting, and it is not that common. Well, the contaminated medicine gave around about 4,500 hemophilic persons HIV and hepatitis C. Maybe not buried, but that we were told Epstein killed himself while on 24/7 surveillance. 2 separate set of guards fell asleep on duty and his surveillance camera turned off on the hour he killed himself. How has there been no follow-up on that? Portugal, basically 10 billion disappeared from the economy to tax havens, and the institution that governs this type of thing can't really explain it. They recently said it was due to an IT problem. So, there is no one responsible and no way of knowing about the money. To put it in perspective, 10 billion is 5% of Portugal's GDP. The story about the judge who was brave enough to hold court for a case about Epstein and which powerful people paid him for services, got a visit at her home by a terminally ill ex-military, posing as a delivery man, killing her son, and wounding her husband. She has since turned this experience into a law to help other judges by not allowing their private information to be known, protecting them in the future. Stephen Donziger successfully defended damages against the Amazon rainforest and its native tribes against Chevron fossil fuel giant, and was then imprisoned, charged by a judge in New York that is in Chevron's pocket, and was forced into house arrest. 3 years ago, I was eating Hot Pockets and cut my gum on something sharp. Apparently in 2021, about 600,000 Hot Pockets somehow got mixed up with some shards of glass. Apparently, some people were seriously injured. They found forever chemicals and carcinogens in those Thinks period panties. There's a pitiful class action lawsuit going on right now. The burden of proof on the victims is enormous and the payout is low, but I was stunned to realize that these things that were being pushed on women for a decade as a more responsible, healthy alternative to other period products is actually linked to chemicals that cause cancer and infertility. It wasn't exactly buried, but it blows my mind how little attention was given to the railroad strike being crushed back in December. They forced workers in shitty conditions to give in to demands by straight up making it illegal to strike, and told us it was necessary to protect the economy. It was a brutal and horrific act of top-down class violence, but it was largely seen as no big deal, business as usual. The rights and lives of average people are apparently worth trampling to protect the profit margins of the insanely rich. A company called BlackRock is slowly buying up houses all over the country so they can rent them out to people rather than people being able to buy their own house. It's going to help destroy the middle class. They are eventually trying to turn us all into permanent renters. They come in and buy a house for more than the asking price, so sellers are more likely to sell to them. In some states, they have bought entire neighborhoods. The middle class is getting gutted in this country. It's a dystopian nightmare. Wizards of the Coast, and their parent company Hasbro, sent actual Pinkerton agents to a residential customer over a batch of Magic the Gathering cards that were mistakenly shipped, because they were like 3 weeks early. They were likely armed, entered without legal representation, searched, and seized the product which was purchased through legal means. Also, both Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast think this is perfectly fine and normal. To add to this, in the fall, Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast hatched a plan to update a gaming license from free to use into having royalties sent to them, and it would be retroactive going back decades. They then went legally after those that discovered the info, and finally in 2023 it came out to be true. Then, after 2 more attempts to update the license, each time saying the previous was just a draft, despite requiring signed agreements, they made it very public that Hasbro and Wizards of the Coast won, and so did the fans. On top, it's been leaked from inside about the disdain from those higher in management regarding customers, and that customers only exist as a barrier to Hasbro's money. They attempted to answer questions at a summit with media influencers, and it turned out to be a media display where they had no answers and clearly had not listened to a thing from their customers or distributors in the last year. Oh, and about the Pinkertons, Hasbro was perfectly fine hiring ex-Pinkerton agents in high-ranking loss prevention roles. So, they're perfectly fine if things go awry. That's just business. Seriously, this is a toy company that has gone so dystopian megacorporation it borders on satire. Drop Hasbro and their subsidiaries. The Pandora Papers that were released about a year ago, which builds upon the Panama Papers. The day after they were released, Facebook was out for the day, which was also all everyone talked about. It was down intentionally to prevent the Pandora Papers from trending and distract everyone. There are only 3 states where it is illegal for a fertility doctor to switch chosen sperm with another sample. On many occasions, they have swapped in their own sperm, with some having dozens of children this way. In many places, there is limited regulation on how much sperm an individual can donate. One known serial donor has fathered multiple hundreds of children, and very little can be done to stop him. Laura High is a donor-conceived person advocating for more regulations. Find her on TikTok or via her podcast Insemination if you want to know more. I think we could list things for a month and still not get close to everything that was buried. I'm going to go with the climate activist crap. The average celebrity generates as much carbon as 2,000 to 4,000 people each year. The entire carbon reduction program worldwide is a scheme to both put the burden of it all on average citizens in developed countries and prevent developing countries to ever grow out of their dependencies. Just so that the people at the top can keep their lifestyle and profits. Something like Google generates as much carbon as 2.5 million people on a yearly basis. You switching to a hybrid car will affect nothing but drive profits up. The fact trillions of dollars came up missing from the Pentagon, and the very next day 9/11 happened, and we never heard about the missing money or what happened to it ever again. The leader of Scientology, David Miscavige, who has been known to be an abusive and manipulative tyrant, has a wife that no one has publicly seen since 2007. There have been wellness checks and apparently, she's fine and well, except no one is allowed to see her to verify this. There are a lot of different theories about where she is, but it's commonly thought that she is alive and being held captive against her will or is brainwashed into a state of complete hopelessness. Scientology, in general, should remain in the public's interest as the people running it are incredibly dangerous and the members are heavily abused. Right now, over 8,000 immigrants came to Chicago. I'm in medical school, trying to do health assessments with a team of about 20 medical students, residents, and licensed physicians in between classes, and research, and other responsibilities, but we have little resources to actually help these people. When I say little, I mean we are getting absolutely no funding and running off donations. The last time I checked, we had a Visa gift card with $70 for 8,000 people. We're completely running on donations. Meanwhile, these people are being made to sleep on the cement for nights, or end in police stations with no guaranteed access to food and water. Furthermore, there are random people who aren't licensed physicians prescribing these people meds and misdiagnosing them, putting them in danger and actually making them worse off. Not to mention, if any of the immigrants need to go to the hospital, we have to take them ourselves. Then we found out that instead of calling us to come get the patient from the hospitals have been giving these people who do not speak English and have no money the phone number for Uber customer service, and telling them to order an Uber back to where they came from. It is truly a humanitarian crisis. The press has talked a little about it but haven't shown the true depths of despair when it comes to this situation. There are so few of us and so many of them. I hope we can make a difference and truly help them. The fact that people say we're out of money and space is an insult to my and other community members' intelligence. There's money for this, it's just not how the people who have it want to spend it.